No one noticed the silence. Not at first. They noticed the lights. They noticed the orchestra. They noticed the man dressed in brilliant white, walking toward the center of the stage, while an ocean of applause shook every wall inside the arena. But no one noticed the silence growing inside Elvis Presley. Years later, people who were there would remember the standing ovation. They would remember the dazzling spotlight. They would remember the tears. Yet the moment that refused to leave their memories was not a song. It was the instant the king of rock and roll looked into a crowd of thousands and searched for only one pair of eyes. Everything that happened after that felt less like a concert and more like watching a man place his heart into someone else's hands. Las Vegas, 1969. Night had wrapped itself around the glittering city, turning every casino sign into a sea of gold and crimson. Luxury cars lined the streets outside the International Hotel, while crowds stretched farther than security barriers could hold. Reporters fought for photographs. Fans clutched vinyl records against their chests. Some carried flowers. Others held handwritten signs with only one name: Elvis. For many of them, this was more than entertainment. It was a dream that had taken years to reach. Inside the arena, every seat was filled long before the first note. The air buzzed with excitement. Laughter mixed with nervous whispers. The orchestra tuned their instruments one final time. A young couple in the front rows argued playfully over which song would open the night. An elderly husband quietly told his wife, "I've seen him 3 times, but every concert feels like the first." She smiled and squeezed his hand. Neither of them knew they were about to witness something no newspaper would ever fully capture. Behind the velvet curtain, Elvis stood alone. The noise outside sounded distant now. He stared into the mirror without truly seeing his own reflection. The famous white jumpsuit fit perfectly. Every jewel sewn into the fabric caught the warm dressing room lights. His dark hair was immaculate. The gold eagle belt rested proudly around his waist. To the world, he looked like a king. But kings often wear armor. Tonight, this suit felt exactly like that. Armor. He slowly opened the drawer beneath the mirror. Hidden beneath neatly folded scarves lay a weathered notebook bound in dark leather. It wasn't valuable. It wasn't famous. No fan even knew it existed. Yet to Elvis, it was worth more than every gold record hanging on the walls of Graceland. Its pages held pieces of himself he had never shared with another soul. Not with producers, not with journalists, not even with his closest friends. Only words, honest words, messy words. The kind people write when no one is watching. He carefully turned each page. Some were filled with crossed-out sentences. Others carried only a single line. One page stopped him. The ink had faded slightly. He traced the sentence with his thumb. "When the applause ends, I only hope she still hears the man behind the music." He smiled sadly. Outside, thousands screamed his name. Inside, he wondered if the one person whose opinion mattered most truly knew how much she meant to him. A knock interrupted his thoughts. 5 minutes, Elvis." His manager's voice came gently through the door. Elvis closed the notebook. He placed it back inside the drawer. Then he hesitated. For a long moment, he simply stood there with one hand resting on the handle. Finally, he opened the drawer again. He took the notebook with him. No one noticed. Not the stage crew, not the musicians, not even the photographers waiting beside the curtain. The notebook disappeared beneath his jacket. Tonight, it belonged on stage. The announcer's voice suddenly thundered across the arena.
"Ladies and gentlemen," the building erupted. "Please welcome." The applause doubled. "The one." People were already standing. "The only." The sound became deafening. "Elvis Presley!" The curtain rose. An explosion of white light swallowed the stage. Thousands leaped to their feet. Some screamed until their voices disappeared. Some cried before Elvis had even spoken a single word. Flashbulbs burst endlessly across the room like distant lightning. Elvis stepped into the light. His smile appeared. The smile every magazine loved. The smile television audiences recognized instantly. The smile that convinced millions everything in his life was perfect. Only one person in the building noticed it wasn't real. Priscilla Presley. She sat quietly near the front, elegant, graceful, almost hidden among the crowd, despite everyone knowing exactly who she was. The moment Elvis appeared, she smiled. But almost immediately, that smile faded. Something was different. She couldn't explain it. She'd watched him perform countless times. She knew every movement, every expression, every nervous habit. Tonight, his eyes carried a softness she had never seen before. Not fear, not exhaustion. Something deeper. Something that looked almost like goodbye. The orchestra lifted their instruments. The conductor raised his baton. Thousands leaned forward. Everyone expected the opening chord of one of Elvis's greatest hits. The baton dropped. The musicians waited. Nothing happened. Elvis didn't sing. The conductor glanced sideways, confused. A violinist slowly lowered her bow. The pianist looked toward the stage manager. A guitarist frowned. Perhaps a technical problem. Perhaps Elvis had missed the cue. The audience chuckled politely. Then, 10 seconds passed. The laughter disappeared. 20 seconds. Nobody moved. 30 seconds. The silence became louder than applause had ever been. You could hear someone cough near the back. A glass gently touched a table. Even the casino sounds outside seemed impossibly far away. Elvis slowly closed his eyes. His breathing became steady. His fingers tightened around the microphone. He wasn't listening to the crowd. He wasn't listening to the orchestra. He was listening to his own heartbeat. Because once he spoke, there would be no turning back. He opened his eyes, very slowly. His gaze drifted across the endless sea of faces. Thousands of strangers, thousands of stories, thousands of lives. Yet none of them were the person he searched for. His eyes continued moving, row after row, face after face, until finally, they stopped. Priscilla. She felt it immediately, even across the enormous room, even beneath blinding stage lights. She knew he was looking only at her. The world around them seemed to disappear. The applause, the orchestra, the photographers, everything faded into silence. Elvis smiled. This wasn't the smile reserved for television cameras. This wasn't the smile fans had memorized from album covers. This smile belonged only to her. He lifted the microphone. When he finally spoke, his voice was almost too soft for such a massive arena. "I've sung thousands of songs.
The audience leaned closer. To millions of people, he paused. But there is one song, another pause, I've never had the courage to sing. The room fell completely still. Elvis drew a slow breath. I didn't write it for the world. His eyes never left Priscilla. I wrote it. His voice cracked for the first time that night. For the woman who saved the part of me fame could never reach. A wave of emotion swept across the arena. No one cheered. No one shouted. Everyone simply listened. Then came the words that would echo through memory for decades. Priscilla. He extended his hand toward the front row. Would you come stand beside me? Just for tonight. Priscilla's heart stopped. She had never heard those words before. There had been no rehearsal, no warning, no plan. Only complete honesty. For one endless moment, she couldn't move. Her eyes filled with tears before she had even taken her first step. And as every person inside the arena slowly turned to look at her, she rose from her seat. The applause began quietly, then grew louder, then louder still, until the entire arena stood as one. But neither Elvis nor Priscilla seemed to hear it anymore, because for them, the concert had already ended. What was about to begin was something far more unforgettable. The applause rolled through the arena like distant thunder. Yet to Elvis and Priscilla, it sounded as though it belonged to another world. She climbed the final step onto the stage. For one brief moment, neither of them spoke. 50,000 people watched in complete silence as Elvis reached for her trembling hand. His fingers wrapped around hers with extraordinary gentleness. The warmth of that touch carried years of memories. The first time they had met, the awkward smiles, the nervous conversations, the endless nights when the world outside disappeared, leaving only two hearts trying to understand one another. Priscilla searched his face. There was something different about him tonight. He looked relieved, as though he had been carrying a secret for years and was finally ready to put it down. Very quietly, so softly that not even the nearest microphone could capture it, Elvis leaned toward her. I've hidden something from you. She blinked. Her heart began to race. You have? He nodded almost imperceptibly. For a long time. Priscilla's mind searched through countless possibilities. Had something happened? Was he ill? Was he leaving? Every frightening thought crossed her mind within seconds. Instead, Elvis slowly reached inside his jacket. The audience watched every movement. No one understood what he was doing. Some photographers rushed closer. Flashbulbs burst across the stage. Elvis carefully removed the old leather notebook. Its edges were worn. Its cover carried small scratches from years of travel. It looked completely ordinary. Yet he held it as though it were the most valuable treasure he had ever owned. Priscilla frowned. I've never seen that before. You weren't supposed to. A faint smile crossed his face. Not until tonight. He gently opened the notebook. Hundreds of handwritten pages rested inside. Some were stained with coffee, others with faded ink. A few carried tiny watermarks where tears had blurred the words long ago. Priscilla slowly covered her mouth. You wrote all of this? Every night I couldn't find the right words. He laughed softly. I discovered paper was more patient than I was. She looked from the notebook back into his eyes. You've been carrying this all this time? For years. Why didn't you tell me? Elvis looked toward the audience. Thousands of strangers had disappeared from his mind once again. His entire world stood only inches away. Because every time I tried, he swallowed. I was afraid ordinary words would never be enough. Priscilla's eyes filled again. She had heard Elvis sing before presidents, before movie stars, before packed stadiums. She had watched him command audiences with effortless confidence. Yet she had never seen him struggle to speak until this very moment. The orchestra remained perfectly still. No conductor moved. No musician dared interrupt. Even the photographers lowered their cameras. Instinctively, everyone understood they were witnessing something too personal to disturb. Elvis slowly turned another page. I started writing these after you fell asleep. Priscilla stared at him. Every night? Almost every night. Even when you were touring? He smiled. Especially then. His voice became quieter. When the hotel rooms felt too big. When applause faded. When everyone else believed I had everything. I missed home. He looked directly into her eyes. And home was never a place. A tear rolled down Priscilla's cheek. It was always you. The arena remained absolutely silent. Not because people had been asked to remain quiet. Because no one wanted to break the spell. Elvis slowly lifted one loose sheet of paper from the notebook. Unlike the others, it looked newer. The ink still appeared dark. I finished this only 3 nights ago. Priscilla's breathing caught. You were writing while I was asleep. He nodded. You smiled in your dreams. A small laugh escaped him. So I kept writing until sunrise. She gently shook her head in disbelief. You never told me. I wanted tonight to tell you. He carefully unfolded the page. The paper trembled slightly between his fingers. Not because of age, because his hands were shaking. For the first time in years. The king of rock and roll looked nervous. He stepped closer to the microphone. The arena instinctively leaned forward. I've sung songs written by brilliant writers. He paused. I've sung songs that sold millions of records. Another pause. But the next words, he looked toward Priscilla, were never written to become famous. They were written because I was afraid. Life moves faster than love sometimes speaks. A hush swept through the room. You spend your whole life believing people know how much you love them. He smiled sadly. Until one day you realize you've never truly said it. Priscilla could no longer hide the tears streaming down her face. Elvis reached up and gently brushed one away with his thumb. The audience gasped softly. It wasn't theatrical. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't performed. It was simply real. The orchestra's pianist quietly looked toward the conductor. The conductor gave the smallest nod imaginable. One single piano note drifted into the darkness. It lingered in the air like a whispered prayer. Then another. Then another. A violin joined so delicately it felt less like music and more like memory itself. The melody carried no urgency, only warmth, only longing, only home. Elvis looked once more at the page in his hand. Then, he folded it closed. Priscilla looked surprised. Aren't you going to read it? He smiled. No. Why?
Because I don't want to read it. He placed the page over his heart. I want to sing it.
The pianist's hands settled over the keys. The violinists lifted their bows. Every musician waited for the signal. Elvis drew one long breath. He closed his eyes. Priscilla tightened her grip around his hand. She could feel his heartbeat. Fast, unsteady, human. Nothing like the fearless legend the world believed they knew. He opened his eyes one final time. They met hers. No cameras mattered. No audience mattered. No headlines mattered. Only the woman standing beside him. His lips slowly parted. The first lyric was ready to leave his heart. And before the opening word escaped into the silent arena, every soul inside that room somehow knew. They were about to witness the most personal song Elvis Presley had ever dared to sing.
The first word left Elvis's lips so quietly that many people leaned forward, afraid they might miss it. There was no dramatic opening, no powerful chorus, no dazzling performance meant to impress the world. It sounded like a conversation, like a husband speaking to the woman he loved after everyone else had fallen asleep. The piano carried his voice gently through the silent arena. Every note seemed to breathe. Every pause carried its own meaning. Elvis never looked at the audience, not once. His eyes remained fixed on Priscilla. The song was no longer traveling through microphones and speakers. It was traveling from one heart to another. As the melody unfolded, every verse revealed another piece of their journey. The night they first met, the uncertainty that slowly became trust, the laughter that filled ordinary evenings, the dreams they whispered when the rest of the world believed they already had everything. The arguments that left painful silence between them. The apologies spoken too late. The moments when fame demanded Elvis from the world, and the quiet moments when all he wanted was to be nothing more than a husband sitting beside the woman he loved. Priscilla could hardly breathe. She had heard thousands of songs during her life. She had watched audiences lose themselves in Elvis's unforgettable voice. But this was different. This wasn't entertainment. Every lyric felt like another page from a diary she had never known existed. She remembered evenings when Elvis had quietly disappeared into another room after midnight. She had assumed he was practicing, or reading, or simply unable to sleep. She never imagined he had been writing pieces of his heart. The orchestra followed him with extraordinary restraint. The strings never overwhelmed his voice. The piano never rushed him. Every musician seemed to understand they were accompanying something far greater than a performance. Halfway through the song, Elvis reached the verse he had struggled to write for months. His voice became unsteady. For the first time that evening, the king lost control. He stopped singing. The melody continued without him. He lowered his head, closed his eyes, and quietly laughed through gathering tears. The audience remained perfectly still, not a whisper, not a single cough, only silence. Priscilla stepped closer. Without saying a word, she gently placed her hand against his cheek. He opened his eyes. Their gaze met once again. "I can't finish it," he whispered. His voice barely rose above the music. Priscilla smiled through tears. "You already have." He shook his head softly. "No. The most important words are still missing." She gently took both of his hands into hers. "You don't have to sing them. You've spent your whole life singing to the world." Her voice trembled.
But tonight, you can simply tell me. Elvis drew a long, slow breath.
The orchestra sensed the moment immediately. One by one, the musicians lowered their instruments, until only silence remained.
Elvis stepped away from the microphone. His next words were never meant for applause. They were meant for truth.
"When people look at me," he said quietly, "they see the records. They see the movies. They see the crowds. They see the lights."
He smiled gently.
"But you were the only person who kept searching for the man after the lights disappeared."
Priscilla's tears flowed freely now. "I wasn't always easy to love." Elvis continued.
"There were nights when I came home exhausted. Nights when I doubted myself. Nights when I wondered if the world loved the image more than the person."
He looked down for a moment before meeting her eyes again.
"And every single time, you reminded me who I really was."
His voice broke.
"If history remembers me, I hope it remembers the songs. But if heaven remembers me, I hope it remembers that I spent my greatest years trying to deserve your love." Priscilla could no longer hold back. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. For several long seconds, neither of them spoke. The embrace itself became the final verse. Across the arena, emotions spread like waves. An elderly veteran quietly removed his glasses to wipe away tears. A young couple instinctively reached for each other's hands. A mother resting beside her daughter kissed the top of her head. One of the violinists lowered her instrument and quietly brushed tears from her face. Even members of the stage crew standing behind the curtains struggled to compose themselves. The photographers stopped taking pictures. Some moments were too sacred to interrupt. Then, something extraordinary happened. Without anyone asking, without any conductor giving instructions, the audience slowly rose to its feet. Not all at once. One person, then another, then another. Within moments, the entire arena stood together. No cheering, no shouting, only a long, heartfelt standing ovation. It wasn't loud at first. It was gentle, almost reverent. Then the applause grew stronger and stronger, until it rolled through the building like waves crashing against a shoreline. It continued for minute after minute. Elvis looked around the arena in quiet disbelief. He had received countless standing ovations during his career, but this one felt different. People were not applauding a legend. They were honoring honesty. When the applause finally softened, Elvis turned back toward Priscilla. He smiled the same shy smile she had fallen in love with years before. Very carefully, he kissed her forehead. Not for the cameras, not for tomorrow's newspapers, simply because it felt right. The orchestra played one final, gentle chord. The lights dimmed. Hand in hand, they slowly walked toward the edge of the stage. Before disappearing behind the curtain, Elvis paused one last time. He looked back at the audience. He placed a hand over his heart. Then he gave a small, grateful nod. No words were needed. The curtain closed. Outside, Las Vegas continued to glow beneath the desert sky. The casinos remained full. The streets remained alive. The city never stopped moving. But inside the hearts of those who had filled that arena, time stood still. Years passed. Hair turned gray. Children became parents. Parents became grandparents. People forgot countless concerts they had attended. They forgot ticket prices.
They forgot where they had parked. They forgot what they had eaten that night. But they never forgot that evening. Whenever someone asked what it had been like to see Elvis Presley perform, those who had been there rarely spoke about the music first. Instead, they smiled quietly. Their eyes drifted somewhere far away,
And they always answered with nearly the same words.
"We thought we were going to hear the greatest singer of his generation." They paused, then smiled through the memory. But what we witnessed was something even rarer. We watched a man set fame aside and give the woman he loved the only performance that truly belonged to her. And perhaps that was why the night lived on long after the final note had faded. Not because it was the loudest concert, not because it was the most spectacular, but because, for one unforgettable evening beneath the lights of Las Vegas, the king did not stand before the world as an icon. He stood before one woman, simply as a husband, who finally found the courage to let his heart sing.